All right, so let's just start in your undergrad. What was the recruitment process to Colorado Mesa that involved baseball and football?
So it's interesting. There actually wasn't a recruiting process to Colorado Mesa. So I started my first 2 years of college were at Montana State Billings. So I went there to play baseball. I was recruited by them out of high school. And it was a pretty standard process. Like I think I had come into contact with the coach somehow or another. He saw me play a couple times, liked where I was at, and he was like, "Yeah, hey, we'd love to have you up here. Like we can offer you this amount of money, this type of scholarship, these opportunities." And I was like, "All right, sweet, right on." So ended up going up there, and I really enjoyed it. It was a great place. I had never been to Montana prior to going to school there, but I loved it up there. Billings was a great city. I met a ton of great people. Baseball didn't really work out the way I wanted it to up there. Um, I don't know. I didn't, things just didn't work out the way I wanted. And I kind of like grew in a weird way physically. Like I got bigger and stronger and faster as a baseball player, more so than I thought I was going to. And I felt like I was turning into more of a football player physically. And I was like, hey, baseball's not working. Maybe I should go try to play football. Like I was a good football player in high school. I'll see what I can do. And I had a buddy at the time, one of my best friends was playing football at Colorado Mesa. So I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about coming to play football. Like, you think I could jump on the squad? And he was like, yeah, definitely. And that coach had recruited me very briefly out of high school for football as well. So I reached out to him and was like, hey, I'm thinking I want to come play football. Like, do you have a spot for me? And he was like, yeah, sure. There was no scholarship opportunity, but he was like, yeah, come out. Like, you're not going to get cut or anything. So just come out. So I went out to play football and I ended up hurting my shoulder pretty bad. Like the first week of practice, I tore my labrum really, really bad right away. So I didn't play at all that season. Got shoulder surgery, but in addition to not playing, I hated it. Like it was just not for me. College football was not my thing, and I'll never forget like at Mesa, the football practice field was like connected to the baseball practice field. So our end zone, like it was a huge outfield, but the end zone essentially like went into the outfield of the baseball practice field, and the infield was on the other side. And I just remember like in the fall standing at practice, like watching them play baseball, and I was like, damn, I wish I was playing baseball. So didn't enjoy it. It wasn't for me. So I had shoulder surgery in the off season, and then in the spring I had to just rehab. In the following year, I had 2 years of eligibility left. I redshirted my freshman year, and so I was like, "Hey, I think I'm going to try to play baseball again." And Mesa has a good baseball team, very good Division II baseball team. So like the year prior in 2014, they had lost in the national championship game. And coming back, it was a lot of the same guys. I remember telling my parents I wanted to play baseball, and they were like, "Hey, just so you know, you might not make the team." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever." But I went out there, met with the coach, Coach Hanks, and then told him I wanted to come out. I'm a left-handed pitcher, and he was like, "Yeah, come out. Like, come see how it goes in the fall." And then he just like it was this weird thing where he just like never told me I couldn't come to practice anymore. So I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm on the team. Like, let's just keep showing up. And then it worked out, and I ended up playing baseball for 2 years there. So that was how that worked.
It's so funny because I don't have a ton of them that come on this podcast, but I have had a few dual sport athletes in D2 and D1 institutions, and they're insane. Like they're the craziest athletes. And they're also like, I gave 100% to this one sport, and then like 50% to the other one. Do you feel that way about your baseball and football experience at Mesa?
I mean, yeah, I was way more into baseball. Like, I think it's hard because I think everybody that plays two sports, you have one that you really love. I have rare, and I don't know that I've ever heard of anybody who was like, hey, I was equally in love with football and baseball. Like everybody says, like, I mean, even you look at people who are fantastic athletes, like at the highest level, people like Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders, like two sport legends. There was one sport that they really liked, that they were really all into, and then another sport they were just really, really good at. So they played it too. So yeah, no, like I said, I was I loved baseball, and I loved playing high school football. It was great, and I loved the sport of football, but I knew right away, like when practice started, it was not going to be my thing. So yeah, it was definitely always baseball for me.
Was the psych major in undergrad because of your sport experience, or did you find that you were a psych major who also played college sports?
Yeah, that had nothing to do with sports. So I was always interested in the brain, in thinking. That kind of came about in high school. I remember I was always interested in it, and then we offered one psychology class in my high school, and you had to be, I think you had to be a senior to take it. I took it my senior year, and when I took that class for sure, I was like, yes, I love psychology. So I showed up like day one, declared a major, and was all in right away. I never even entertained anything else. So it was always that. And then the sport aspect of it just kind of worked its way in over time.
I know, like, I went to West Virginia and they
Mhm.
had a sports psychology undergrad,
Yeah.
but the majority of sports psychologists and support staffers specific to mental health that I bring on this podcast got their bachelor's degrees in general sport or general psych, or general counseling
Hmm.
or education. And then they found sports psych later down the road. Did you always have, like, once you realized that psych was where you wanted to go, what was the process of deciding that it was going to be sports specific?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, there's places like West Virginia where they have a unique path where you can take those types of courses and have that type of degree as an undergrad, but a lot of places don't. And, like I said, I wasn't sure at first. I just knew I really liked the brain. As I went through my undergrad, I had an advisor during my undergrad, like the last three at Mesa, the last 3 years, who he had done some sports psychology work. He practiced sports psychology. He himself had a counseling degree, but was doing sports psychology work. So I got into contact with him, took a bunch of his classes. We got along really well. It was super interesting. And then at that time as well, so my dad was like a leadership coach. He still is like a leadership executive coach. And he had started doing some work with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And the Pirates, so this was in like 2012, 13, were one of the first organizations to employ a number of full-time mental performance professionals. So I was able to tag along with him. I remember I went one time down to Bradenton where their complex was, and I just like hung out with those guys for 2 days. And I was like, this is pretty sweet. Like, I think I like this. It's cool that you can come to work and just go to baseball. So I got into it then. And then, one of the guys there, Bernie Holiday, studied at the University of Idaho. And he was like, hey, this is a great program. You should go there. It's super applied, like a lot of good experience. So I went and did that. But I can say there was a point in time along my journey where I was very interested in neuroscience. And I was potentially going to pursue like, actually, I was doing my master's in sports psych, but I was like, oh, maybe I could transition and do like a PhD in neuroscience. And thankfully, at University of Idaho, they have a partner program with Washington State, and so Washington State offers a neuroscience master's and PhD. And I was like, let me just go take a neuroscience class there. And it was brutal. I did not. It was so boring. It was such a disappointment because I thought it was going to be so interesting, and we were just like writing papers on like genes and how the brain formed, and I was like, this is so lame. I'm out of here. So thankfully, I didn't pursue that. It worked out, but that's essentially how I ended up where I was with sports psych.
When you were pursuing your psych degree, were you, did you find that you were implementing what you were learning on the field? And did that make it easier or more difficult to process what you were learning?
I actually didn't really implement it on the field, which it would have helped me if I did. It really would have. But I think at the time, like, I don't know, it's hard to say back then. Like, as a young athlete, I maybe thought I didn't need it. Like, I mean, I see a ton of athletes now. You think you don't need it, right? It's like, no, I just need to work harder at baseball and I'll be a better baseball player. Like, I almost wasn't even at the point where I was drawing a connection to what I'm learning in the classroom and on the field. I never understood that for as much physical work as I'm doing, I should probably do some work on the mental end as well. And some of the stuff I was presented was more like, oh, sports psychology and team dynamics and all that. So short answer is no, I didn't really implement it. I wish I would have. In the long run, a couple years out when I did my master's, I was like, man, it would have made me a lot better if I had taken some of this stuff to heart. But it worked out the way it should have in the end, I think.
What was your first experience with sports-specific psych modalities?
Ooh,
I
first
mean,
experience.
did Mesa have a sports psychologist on staff? Where did you even figure out that sports psych was an avenue to pursue?
So technically, like the professor I mentioned who was my advisor, he did sports psych work with maybe just one team, maybe just the volleyball team. He did some work with them, but we didn't have one for baseball. It truly kind of came about because I talked to him and then come into contact with the guys at the Pirates, and they were like, "Hey, we're doing these things down here, where we're using these principles to help people perform better." And I just thought it was really cool. I thought it was super interesting. So being around them and seeing some of the work they had done, and I think being down there and seeing exactly how it looked in a baseball setting was really exciting to me. So really that was my first exposure to it. And I always like to read. I read a lot of books, things like that as well. So it was sort of the books, but a lot of just meeting these people that were doing the work and being like, I'd like to do that work.
Yeah, I mean, I was raised a Penguins, Pirates, Steelers fan, and
Yeah,
I have spent many a summer at PNC, and they run a very fun experience up there.
I've heard.
When you were getting your master's degree, what were your intentions? I mean, did you want to come back to work in baseball? Were you just excited to be working in sports? I mean, what was your goal with the master's? Because now you had funneled your psych experience down to a very niche topic.
hmm I knew I wanted to work in sports. I honestly, like looking back, I wasn't, I didn't have a super specific goal with that degree. I was like, hey, I want to go, like, I want to work in sports psychology. Maybe it's baseball, maybe it's elsewhere. I always kind of had this feeling. I was like, I'm just going to go there because I know I love to do this. I know I love this work. I'm super interested in it. I'm good at it. I just want to go up there and I want to see where it takes me. So I was really kind of open to whatever happened. I wanted to get the experience, wanted to learn, wanted to be around somebody. My advisor, his name was Damon Burton, was kind of an OG in the field. Like he came up in the 70s. He was the first ever sports psychology professional employed at a university. So he was an OG. He'd been through it all. I was like, I'm going to learn from this guy, get some experience, and see what happens. And then the baseball thing kind of snuck its way in while I was there, and it ended up working out. But I just wanted to learn. I wanted to really see what it was all about, see how it was going to work from a professional perspective, and then kind of see what roads opened up for me. So I was really just open to experience.
I think it's interesting when you say that like the people who were mentoring you were decades ahead, the trailblazers of the industry. Now when you work with athletes, there's kind of this general understanding of the components of psych. Do you find that that's easier to help them with because they come in kind of knowing that mental health is an aspect of their performance?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it makes it easier. And it makes it easier generally because they're willing to engage with it. I mean, it just, the door's already been open. And not only do they know it exists, but they understand that it is a part of their development as an athlete now. Because in previous years, like even when I was playing, like, my last year was 2016. Like when I look at the players we have in our organization who are close to my age, and even based on my experience, what I do was never a part of the game. And it's not that they're resistant to it, it's just not seen as a part of your development like it is for the younger guys now. So that makes it a lot easier. They're super open to it, they're interested in it, they have some experience, they know the basics. It's awesome. There are times where guys have to unlearn some things. Maybe they've picked up, just like you can pick up bad habits physically, maybe they've learned things incorrectly along the way and they need to have some things tweaked around, but generally it makes it way easier and it makes our work more impactful, I think.
What do you think should be in someone's sports psychology starter pack?
What do you
What
mean? What do you mean?
what kind of skills should be first learned when you're working with an athlete who has no understanding of how sports psych can help them?
Oh, okay. Okay, this is a good question. So, first of all, you have to teach somebody self-awareness. You have to bring awareness to this idea that you need these concepts to get better. And they need to learn where they're at right now. We need to understand where they want to go, help them understand that there is a gap between those two things. You're here, you want to be here. There's a big space in the middle. So we need to identify what that growth looks like. So they have to develop self-awareness, and they need to understand that that's an ongoing process. Like, hey, you're going to learn about yourself and you need to audit yourself, check in consistently to make sure you're moving in the right direction. And we need to patch up any holes along the way. So absolutely have to teach them self-awareness. You have to teach them the importance of controlling the controllables. This is a super underrated and like simple piece of sports psychology, but it's really difficult. You have to understand that if you're going to grow in a big way here, you got to let go of the things you can't control and go all in on the things you can control, which is not many things. You're going to end up letting go of a lot of stuff here. All the things you want to control, all the outcomes you want, can't control them. So we're going to figure out what you can control and then go all in on that. We always teach them. I like to teach self-talk right away. I think, and really the way I teach it is I frame it as high quality thinking. So most people don't choose their thoughts. Most people just have thoughts pop into their head, they roll with them, and then their behaviors follow accordingly. So we teach guys right away, you have to be a gatekeeper of your thoughts. You need to learn right now that not every thought you have is going to serve you. And so when something pops into your head, you need to be able to hold on to it for a sec, look at it, decide, okay, is this going to make me better in the moment, or is it useless? Is it ego driven? Is it going to set me back? What is this thought? Okay, if it's good, let's roll with it. If not, let's kick it out. And you need to become a master of doing that. You have to be a gatekeeper of your thoughts, because if you don't have those high quality thoughts, you can't perform in an elite fashion. I was taught really early the golden rule of mental performance is everything starts with a thought. Thoughts become beliefs and beliefs become actions. So if you want to perform in an elite fashion, you got to think in an elite fashion first. So teaching that high quality thinking principle is key. That's where it all starts. And then along with that, I mentioned self talk, that internal dialogue is really important. Helping people understand resilience and nonlinear growth is also very important, especially in baseball. Like, dude, this is not going to be a straight line up for you. I know you think it is and you want it to be so bad, but it's not and it can't be. So let's figure out how we're going to bounce back. You need to learn to fail the right way. We say fail like a pro. Everybody fails. It's not that the people who are where you want to be right now fail less than you or failed less than you. They've just figured out how to do it a little bit better. So let's start failing the right way now, developing the right relationship with adversity. Um, what else? We always teach confidence pretty early too, and helping guys understand what that actually is, because that's a concept that gets very murky, funky. You hear it talked about a lot, like, hey, be confident, be confident. And then no one really knows what that feels like or how they're supposed to get there. They're just like, they see somebody and they're like, yeah, that's a confident person, be like them. So we teach guys what confidence actually looks like, how to actually develop it, tools for maintaining, and how to handle the days where you don't feel confident, because that's a real thing too. So that was kind of a lot, but that's probably a decent starter pack.
I'd say when you are looking at relationship-based approaches to counseling, what are you as the practitioner looking for in that relationship with someone who is trying to trust you with their mental well-being?
So for me, this is the most important part of the job. The relationship is everything. Because if we don't have a relationship and we don't have trust, we are going to go nowhere. So, and that a lot of the time in my job looks like me just being around. Like in the baseball world, I mean, there are guys that show up right away and they want to dive in, they want to go deep. But there are also a lot of guys who show up and they're skeptical. They want to know if I'm dishing out is BS or not, which is fair, and I respect that. And one of the things that I do is like I'm just going to be around. I'm going to make sure they know me. I'm going to make sure we have plenty of conversations that are real and intimate, but maybe not even necessarily baseball or performance related. Like I just want you to know that I'm a human being here with you and I care about you. Like I'm here for your development. And along with that, I don't force anything. There are times where guys need to hear something from me, and occasionally I have to speed up this process. But more often than not, it's just it takes time. I mean, there are guys that I have spent 3 years with, just talking with and building a relationship with, and then finally 3 years down the road, they're like, "Hey, Colt, I need to talk. I'm struggling," and I'm like, "All right, dude, let's roll." So being being around, being present, letting them know like I don't have an agenda. I'm not going to force you to do anything. I'm just a resource for you is really important. I know generally, so I've only taken one counseling class ever. It was during my PhD. I had to take it. And one of the things I disagreed with in a big way in that class was the professor was like, "Hey, you need to not share about your life in a counseling setting." And in my line of work, I think that's imperative because it shows vulnerability, and you can't get vulnerability unless you give it. So I, sh- I'm an open book. Like, you want to know how I played in college? I played terribly, dude. I sucked. Like, I'm not afraid to tell you this. Like, you want to hear about how I handle these situations, what's going on in my life? Like, absolutely. This is building a relationship. And then they're willing to come to me too. So just being around, being present, treating them like a normal person, and then being vulnerable and sharing, I think are two ways that have really helped me build strong relationships and put me in the right place with guys. And it gives me a chance to help them when the time's right.
For sure. I mean, when you're working with a farm system that is just kind of all over the country, and maybe you're only seeing an athlete once a month or once every 2 months, how do you even begin to build that relationship?
So thankfully, the way it works for us now, so like with the draft, we draft people in July. So we draft a bunch of dudes in July. Right when we draft them, we go down to Scottsdale and they all come down and we spend 4 days with them. We meet everybody individually, spend time talking, hang out with them. So the relationship starts there. And then some of them will go out to affiliate teams, which mean if they do is great because we'll see them again out there. And then at the end of the season, like mid late September into October, we have another camp that's about 3.5 weeks long, instructional league, where all those guys are there. So we get to spend an additional 3 to 4 weeks ish getting to know them, working with them, being with them in a competitive setting, and just building that relationship. So we have those that block. And then in the off season, there's always communication. We have another camp in January that gives us another chance to talk to them. Then in spring training, obviously, we have 4 to 6 weeks ish where we get to spend a lot of time. So those camps and where we're seeing guys every day, that's where it has to happen because it's hard. Like we get guys throughout the season, we trade for people, we sign a free agent, and they show up, and we just meet them somewhere. I'm like, I roll into like Hartford one day, and I'm like, "Hey, bro, I'm Colt. Nice to meet you." And sometimes they're interested, and sometimes they're not. So those camps and that time is critical because we're just around each other all the time. So that's where the magic is. And then it's a lot of guys, but we do our best to meet with everybody during those camps. So in spring training, that's 160 people we meet with. And then we have at least a plan. So the next time we see him, there's something for us to talk about. So that's generally how it ends up working.
I was looking at your private practice's website, and I am such a fan of the phrase becoming an architect of your mentality.
Mm,
10 out of 10,
you
first of
like that?
all. I love it.
Thank you.
Secondarily, what do you mean by that?
Okay. So when you think about what an architect does, an architect will have this idea and come up with a blueprint and show everybody what needs to be built. But generally, like they have this idea, this conceptual, they've conceptualized this thing that's meaningful and they want to build it. So becoming the architect of your mentality means number one, having a vision for what you want your mentality to be. Architects are visionaries, they're creators. So you have to think about for yourself, okay, who do I want to be from a mental perspective? How do I want to think? How do I want to perform under pressure? What's my day-to-day look like from, my thinking perspective? And then after you have that vision, you put that blueprint together, meaning you put some specifics in place that are actions. Okay, well, I have to take these actions, these actions. This is something I have to do every day. This is my routine here. So I can piece together this brain, this mentality that serves me best. That's generally the way I think about it. When you think of, I mean, mental architecture is just the foundation, the blueprint for what's going to make you a great performer on the mental end.
Let's back up one question. What is the difference in the mental skills training that you do with your athletes within the spring training atmosphere versus during the regular season?
Yeah, good question. So spring training so we're very fortunate with the Rockies that we are very involved. The mental skills team is super involved almost every day. They value what we do, and because of that, they give us space like throughout the day. So Like I said, lots of individual meetings, which that's how it trends toward in the season. So we'll always have individual meetings, but during spring training in a lot of these camps, we get to have group sessions, which is fantastic. So like during instructional league, our fall camp, we have a group session every single day for that camp. We get them in the theater and they're short 15 minutes, but we have a group session every single day. Then during spring training, we'll get a few group sessions. It's a little bit harder because it's just so many people, but we'll get pitchers at least once, infielders, outfielders, catchers, everybody at least once in a group session. Then we'll do like, so for position players, we'll have a station outside when they're going through batting practice. We'll be a station. So they'll go from shagging in the outfield to bunting to hitting. Then they'll come into us and we'll have a meeting for 10 minutes during their batting practice. With pitchers, at least 2, 3 days a week, we run visualization bullpens where we get them up on the mound and we just do visualization practice. You go through your windup, you work on pitches you're trying to execute, you work on navigating difficult situations, visualizing yourself getting through them, all that stuff. And then we have a ton of individual meetings on top of that. We'll also meet with staff too. So generally, we get a good mix. In a camp as big as spring training, we get a good mix. Some group, small group, individuals, and then during instructs, we get big group and then individual. And then in the season, it becomes in the season, whenever I go to an affiliate, I like to do a group session. If I'll always talk to the manager, whoever, and be like, hey, is there something you want me to touch on here? Get them in the clubhouse for 20 minutes and do a group session. But then it's primarily individuals.
The name of my podcast came from baseball
Mm-hmm.
because I love the mentality of the pitcher, specifically the closer. What do you see specifically in closers that either makes them wild or completely sane in the moment?
Yeah, it's interesting because you have like it's like both two ends of the spectrum that are successful, right? You have the crazy nutso dudes who can come out and it's wild thing from major league, right? They're fired up, they're crazy. I think when you have guys like that, it's just like that's their default. That's just who they are. And they live within the chaos so well because it's almost like they are the chaos. Right? They come out there and they're driving this whole thing and it's like, dude, there's no moment bigger than me because I'm it. This is the whole deal. So they're going to come out and just go crazy. I think that works really well. And then you have the kind of cold-blooded assassin type. Like we have a guy right now in our organization. He's a young guy, and his name is Seth Halverson. He was in the big leagues last year. He is nasty, and he is so even keeled, calm, like no emotion ever. And I think conversely, compared to the other guy, that mentality it works almost the same way where it just doesn't matter. The heart rate never changes, the thinking never changes. There's only one mission, regardless of what happens. I'm just gonna throw, and that's it. Like it just doesn't matter. They're almost like it's just bulletproof, and you can keep bouncing stuff off them, and it just like doom, 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 doesn't matter. So I think you do have to be one or the other. It helps to be one or the other, where you can come in every day is a new day, and you're just gonna go throw. I actually had a good conversation with a guy. He was our rookie ball pitching coach a long time ago. Actually, not a long time ago, but in 2018, one of the first guys I met, his name was Doug Jones. And he was a closer for a long time in the big leagues, really good career. And I asked him one day about being a closer. I was like, what was the big thing for you that made you so good? And he was like, I decided that strikes and runs count the same in the ninth inning as they do the first inning. And he was like, that took any pressure off me because it's like, it's just strikes and pitches and runs. It's all the same. And so he kind of embodied that like cold blooded, just silent killer type that works. But yeah, you got to be one or the other for sure. You have to be able to handle the chaos.
How do you see that individual on either side of the spectrum seeking out your assistance? I mean, what do they ask of you if they're already so programmed to be one or the other?
Not much. Honestly, not much. Like there are every once in a while they may have a question about something, like they may need some assistance if they have a new cue or a new thing they're working through mechanically with a pitch. Maybe that's something they bring up. Maybe they want to get a routine in place just to make sure they're consistent with their behaviors, that kind of stuff in between pitches. But more often than not, guys like that don't come to me that often. And it's great. I envied guys like that when I played because I'm like, dude, I wish I could just go out there and do it every time like you. So generally not much. They can just go play.
So you'll see at the top, we have a timer ticking down. Once that timer ends, get out of this interview. The same link that you got into this one with will work to re-up and the timer will go away.
Cool.
Zoom is dumb. But specific to pitchers, how do you work with athletes differently who exist in the stop motion of sport versus a running experience?
Like a golfer?
Like a golfer, yeah, I guess, or like a football player or a lacrosse player or a rugby player. Like with baseball, it's very pitch by pitch by pitch.
Mhm.
Here's the pitch clock. Here's what we're doing. Here's time to reset. Here's your mental process. Do you find that people are drawn to one versus the other depending on what their mental process is?
Maybe. I don't know necessarily. I think personality plays a big role. Because like you mentioned football, the mental skills portion of football is very different because it's just such a unique sport, and you have the personalities you have are not always necessarily guys that naturally are or need to be like thinkers and decision makers in the moment. Like football happens so fast and it's such a physical game where it's like, hey, if I play linebacker, like I play linebacker, like I know my responsibility. My responsibility is here. And if for some reason I forget it, I just need to go hit somebody. Like that's how you survive in football. Like I know if I forget my responsibility or don't know it for some reason, just go hunt the football. That's how it goes. Or if someone comes in front of me, hit them. So you can have that kind of mentality in football, especially on the defensive end. And that doesn't require a lot of, like, there are moments where it's like, hey, I'm out of control. I need to reset. I need to be able to make decisions, things like that. But generally, it doesn't require the same mental skills that like a stop motion sport would, where you have a lot of time to think in between. Like I say in football, you don't have to be much of a deep thinker because you just don't have time to. Like unless you play quarterback where you have to do a bunch of different stuff, you have like maybe, 20 seconds. And part of that 20 seconds is you getting the play and being told what your responsibilities are going to be. Then you have to process and then you go. So it's really not even 20 seconds. So there's room for mental skills like with quarterbacks and things like that in football, and a lot of special teams positions like kickers, punters, things like that. But a lot of them, it's not really in their wheelhouse. They're not super interested. Like I said, teaching guys, we can go into a football player and be like, hey, you play safety. Like, here's what I believe is the best place for you to be mentally as a safety. Like, here's what the mentality of a safety looks like. And here's where you need to be every single play to perform your best, decision making wise, to be a physical player, all that stuff. That works. And if it's a quarterback, it's different because we can talk about decision making, thinking, routines, letting go, stuff like that. But football, there's not much. I do some work in basketball. Basketball, there's a little more mental skills than football. Um, I've found that it becomes a little more general just in terms of like here are the mentality shifts that will allow you to be a successful basketball player. We talk a lot about moving on from failure, failing like a pro, having a killer instinct, being able to finish games, things like that. So there's a little more in basketball. I can't say I've ever worked with a rugby player, so I don't know. I don't know what it's like in rugby, but generally there's a difference between the stop motion where you have a lot of time to think and you have to think versus the ones where it's fast and you can almost just be instinctual.
What has been the impact of the pitch clock on your job?
There was a little bit at first, just because it sped guys up. Like, I mean, one of the things we teach everybody as a pitcher and a hitter, you have to have a routine between pitches. You have to have a set of actions that you can rely on to create some consistency in your behaviors and your thoughts. So for a lot of guys, that meant trimming those down because, the pitch clock is, whatever, 15, 18 seconds, and you have to be engaged at a certain point. So it's really like a 10-second routine. So it was a little bit of a hiccup at first, but honestly, it's been a good thing because it's like you got to trim the fat on those routines, man. Like you can't, jump up and down and clack your cleats 4 times in a row because it makes you feel better anymore. Not that anybody did that, but the silly things that, people might want to do, are gone now. So it's created some efficiency, which I think is great. It forces guys to only do the stuff they need to do.
I mean, I love talking about reset routines because some athletes thrive in reset routines that are 10 seconds. Some thrive in a whole morning
Mhm.
of pre-game rituals. I find that baseball players kind of are both of those groups, but it's interesting when you look at like what happens in 10 seconds when you need to speed this process up to just a few thoughts, what takes priority?
So we actually tell them it's one thought. So we're going to give you one thought, and it's really just whatever in the moment gets you back into that spot. So like when we teach routines, particularly in-game routines, we use the signal light model, green, yellow, red, right? Green light, you're cruising, everything's good. Yellow light, things are changing, your emotions are maybe starting to get the best of you. You need to slow things down, make an adjustment, and then red light is you're fired up, you're emotional, almost out of control. You need a hard reset. So like in game, green light, you have your typical between pitch routine, right? It might be you catching the ball, swiping the rubber, one quick breath and a mantra, go. Yellow light routine, maybe you mix in one more physical reset with one additional mantra or an additional deep breath, and then you go. And then the red light routine would probably exist in the dugout in between innings or when someone was calling time. So we personalize it for everybody, but it's like going through that signal light process. We want to make sure guys understand what it's going to take for them to get back. Like, hey, we need to know what you're usually like when you get into a yellow or red situation, and then what you can do to get yourself back into control. And like I said, that's going to be one to two things. Like you only have 15 seconds. You only have time for one to two things. We make guys breathe. A breath is non-negotiable for us. So one of the things you're going to do is breathe. But apart from that, like maybe it's a physical reset button on your glove. Maybe it's you're going to swipe your hat or whatever. Maybe it's, swiping the rubber off, whatever it is, or it's a certain mantra you use. But you have to be super efficient. You get one thought, one intention, and then a physical action plus a breath, go. That's what we give them.
How do you, as the sports psychologist, help athletes navigate the slumps and the yips?
Well, two different things. So slumps are a lot easier than the yips. So slumps generally, I tell guys this is the least sexy answer you're going to get through a slump, but we need to take a big reset and we need to go all in on the controllables and having a process that puts you in a position to perform your best, helps you feel like you're in control, and just it helps you compete. Because what I see happen is when most guys get in slumps, they chase outcomes. Like you're 0 for 15, 20, you're dying to get a hit. All you're thinking about, and we hear him say it all the time. Hey, I just need to get a double. I need to get a bomb right here. I need to hit something at 110 miles an hour. And it's like, dude, if you're focused on hitting a double, you're never going to get out of this thing. And I'm always like, how do guys usually get out of slumps? Like, well, a lot of times it's like a broken bat flare single that falls over the second baseman's head. Like a pitch you got beat on that you just end up getting a bat on. So I'm like, all right, let's figure out what you're doing right now. Like, what are you doing well? What controllables are you controlling in the batter's box? Okay, you're doing those. Okay, so what are we missing? We'll figure out what you're doing right, what you're not doing right in terms of your controllables. Then we'll turn all the we'll go all in and be like, okay, we have guys identify what makes an at bat successful for you outside of results. So you can't tell me getting a hit makes an at bat successful for you because you can do everything wrong and get beat super bad and end up getting a hit. That happens all the time. Just like in the opposite, you can do everything right and be so dialed in the box and take the best swing of your career, and it's going to go right into the shortstop's glove. So we go, okay, what makes an at bat successful for you? And it's the same things. It's pretty much universal. Sticking to my plan or my approach, swinging at pitches I should swing at, not chasing, hard contact, going deep into a count, all things like that. And so we make a checklist. Okay, here are your 5 qualities of a successful at bat. We're going to focus on all of these. These are your only intentions when you get in the box are accomplishing these things. And if you come back and it's like, yep, I was 3 for 5, successful at bat, no matter what happens. If I was 2 for 5 or 1 for 5, it wasn't. Why wasn't I successful? Let's make the adjustment. So we make sure we're controlling their controllables, and then we make sure they have a routine that they're working through every day that is putting them in a position to perform well physically, mentally, strategically, but it's also going to focus a lot on controllable. So we just get them away from an outcome focused, make sure their daily work is the right way and they're evaluating themselves correctly. And that usually puts them in a place to get their find their way out of the slump. Um, the yips is really hard. It's a super tough one, and it's an interesting thing because it shows up differently for everybody. Shows up for a different reason. It's physically presented in a different way. It's perceived differently by everybody. So it has to be super individualized. Like then there are some guys that they get the yips and it's frustrating, but they want to attack it head on. They're like, hey, I'm going to work through this. I'm going to fight my way through this. And we'll put together some drills, like throwing drills that will help them loosen up and get more unconscious with their throwing. Cause like the yips is just when something that's typically unconscious, you don't have to think about, becomes super conscious and you're thinking about it way too much. So we do some drills to help them, get fluid, get unconscious again with it. But sometimes, it's a really long, it can be a really long process. Like it could be years of just talking and helping and working through those emotions you're feeling and getting to the point where you're comfortable with a plan to get better. So it's there's no easy answer for that one, but you got to know the player and you can't force them into anything. I found that trying to force somebody's hands with that doesn't do anything but make it worse typically. So you gotta know the guy you're with.
How do you find that muscle memory specific to swing and pitch mechanics helps and hurts your ability to break through on a mental basis?
Oh, well, I mean, it's a big deal, right? I think so. Muscle memory is interesting. This is what I said earlier. Like some guys have habits they have to unlearn. I think there are times where things are so unconscious for you from a physical perspective that you don't know you're doing it. Like guys have bad habits or tendencies that are so built into what they do, they're completely unaware of it. So if that's the case, you have to recognize that okay, what's hurting them is an unknown unknown for them. They don't know it. So we have to make it known and we have to get them to a point where they're aware of this and then kind of work through it more systematically as opposed to just hey, here's a new cue, go for it. So it definitely if somebody is in a place where they have an unconscious tendency that's harming them, it's just much more of a process of developing awareness, helping them understand it is actually a problem, and then having a deliberate process to get through it as opposed to just, hey, you're here. What's a new cue that might work for this?
How much I was listening to an interview that you had done recently, and you were asked about innovation and how much of your job requires innovating. And I think that it's interesting to look at your role in terms of innovating versus reinforcing well-held principles.
Mm.
Where do you stand on that?
A great quote that I heard was, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. So generally, people need to be reminded of principles all the time. We forget things really fast. One of the things I've come to realize is that the recipe for success is very simple but very difficult. And it generally requires you doing the basics really, really well repeatedly for a long time. So I think that's something we need to help guys understand. And a lot of innovation, creativity for us is like, hey, can I find a new creative, innovative way to teach this foundational principle? And that's critical because the way like everybody hears things differently. And I can't tell you how many times I've worked with guys and I've told them the same thing 15 different ways. And it's the 15th way that they're like, oh, that's it. Right. So a lot like we have to reinforce, we have to remind people of what's important, but we also have to be very creative and innovative in terms of how we're teaching these things. Like, and I think that's something we do a pretty good job of the way we teach things internally. We evolve, we get feedback, we figure out what's working, what's not, what guys like, what they don't like, and we'll adjust. And we've come a long way from where we started. Like, because at first you're just doing stuff you don't know. But yeah, I think it's a good balance, right? You have to be creative and innovative, but you also have to remind people all the time of these basic principles that are going to get them to where they want to go.
Since you joined the Rockies in 2018, how have you changed the most as a practitioner?
Oh gosh, I've changed a ton. Like I mean, back then, like when I first got, I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew like I had some of the tools. It's so funny, right? Because going to grad school, they teach this stuff, and like you learn like the mental tools and the basics, the ins and outs of sports psych, and you have this weird idea that like, okay, I'm going to go work in this field, and someone's going to come up to me one day and be like, "Hey, Colt, I'm struggling with my self-talk. Can you help me reprogram it?" And I will be like, "Why, yes, I can. Here are the ways you do that." And it's just like that never ever happens. Like I think along the way, I've learned to number one, I've learned to ask way better questions. That's something that's been so important for me because, like I said, a lot of times guys don't know what they don't know. And I have to learn to ask exactly the right question in that moment that will help them realize what I'm trying to teach them or will give me the information I need to give them the right tools back. So I've become way better at asking questions. I've also become way better at watching and observing and seeing holes or gaps real time, which just takes a lot of practice. It just takes reps. And I think along with that too is I've learned to navigate conversations and find what people need without them really telling me because they don't know how to say what they're dealing with. They just know it feels wrong. They're struggling and they don't want to feel like that anymore. So reading into what they're saying, knowing personalities and all that has been a big area of growth. So I mean, there's just been a ton of growth. And I think too, I've become a lot more creative. I've become a lot more confident in what I do. And that just comes with reps, but it also is a result of trying different things and not being married to some approach that I was taught was going to work. Like just because they taught me this in grad school, like doesn't mean I have to do it here. I need to do what works. So I'm going to do what works. So there's been a lot of growth in a lot of areas for sure.
What did the time period between graduating with your PhD and getting hired by the Rockies look like?
There was no time period. So I got hired on full time in 2022. And that, so I was like at spring training. That was such a grind of a spring training because I was like going to the field in the morning and working. And then in the afternoon, I would just go home and finish writing my dissertation. So I was like, I would like finish up, go back, get a coffee, and just like grind on a dissertation for 4 hours at night, send it to my advisors, and then get feedback. And I eventually graduated that spring. So I remember like taking my first, I think, two trips with the Rockies and then flying back home, graduating, getting my PhD, and then flying back out to wherever else to keep working. So it was totally like it happened at exactly the same time, which was perfect. Like, and thankfully too, with my schooling, they were like, "Hey, you have this job. We can transition you to an online position." And I didn't have any classes left to take. I just had to finish my dissertation. So I taught a class that semester online as well. I taught intro psych online. And then I helped out in a research lab still. I was kind of just like an advisor to younger students. And then, yeah, finished up the dissertation and then just kept going back to work.
What was your dissertation in?
My dissertation was on project based learning and introductory psychology and its effects on
I really like that.
motivation, goals, um, perceived classroom environment, knowledge retention, all that.
How do you transpose that onto a dugout?
Well, the biggest thing for me, I think, is so actually one of the measurements I used was actually a scale that was developed in sport for like it's called motivational climate, and it has to do with the way coaches typically treat athletes and the environment you create as a coach. So number one, and again, like in simplest terms, it's like you need to create an environment that isn't hung on results, that you're not embarrassing people, is generally psychologically safe. People are available to take risks and they can come to you if they have problems. That's what it is. So that one rings true for sure as someone who's in a dugout and working with coaches, helping them understand that this is a real thing. And the climate you create absolutely will dictate performance. That was a big piece. And then also, one of the most important theories that I used in my dissertation is constructivism, which is a learning theory, and it presents the idea that like I can't just give somebody knowledge. So like if I'm explaining a concept to you, I can't just like tell you what it is and beam it into your head. Like as I talk about it, you hear it and then you construct that knowledge based on the knowledge you already have and integrate it into those pathways that already exist. Like that's how learning really occurs. And again, as I work with people or as coaches work with people, reminding them that you can't just tell them something and expect them to know it. Just because you explain a concept does not mean they've got it. Everybody has to create knowledge in their own way. So this can't be like a banking model where you expect them to come up, give you a question, you give them an answer, send them on their way. You have to help them construct knowledge, understand what they already know, what they don't know, and try to make it make sense to them in their own way. I think that's been a big thing for me because for me, teaching athletes and working with athletes, it's all the same stuff. I'm helping them learn concepts and implement them into their life. That means they have to make them their own. So that one, the constructivism piece, has been a big part of what I do.
How did the name for your private practice come to be?
Oh, so that's a good question. I'm trying to remember how I actually came across it. I think it started because I honestly can't remember where I first came across the name, but I was interested in this idea of like something that symbolized a journey or a pursuit of something meaningful. And I came across this like ancient Nordic symbol, which was the rado symbol. And that's what it represents. And I was like, that's so cool because it's shaped like an R and it's backwards and it looks awesome. So I was like, there it is. Rado Performance was born. And I think like I liked the name, I liked the logo that it put together, but also like having something that represented what this work is. Like, this is a journey. This is you pursuing a higher version of yourself, a better version of yourself. There's nothing more meaningful than that. So that's exactly what it is. That's where it came from.
I am out of questions for you. Do you have anything that you think that I missed about telling your story or about the work that you do, about the impact that you want to have? Questions, comments, concerns?
I don't think so. I don't
Awesome.
think so. No, I think I'm good. That was good stuff.
Thank you.